Hello and welcome to Become the Teapot. I'm Iain.
And so am I.
There's an old proverb that says, inside every person there are two Ians, forever locked in combat over the quality of comic books and their film adaptations. One Iain is all things good. Compassion, love, trust, and a huge amount of experience with comic books. The other Iain is all things evil. Fear, shame, self-destruction, and a comic book knowledge that stems mostly from YouTube.
Hey,
What? It's a proverb. I didn't write it.
I'm pretty sure you did, but I can't prove otherwise. Didn't the proverb used to be about wolves?
Or dogs, yeah. But if the New Mutants can change it to whatever bullshit they want for plot convenience, then so can we. And speaking of the New Mutants, that's what we're watching this week.
No way.
Yes way!
And what are we reading?
The New Mutants!
No way.
Yes way! Specifically, New Mutants Volume 1, 18 to 20, otherwise known as The Demon Bear Saga.
All right, come on then. Let's get started. I can barely contain myself.
Before we start, I want to do something that we've not really done in a while.
Hmm?
Going into this, Iain, how much did you know about the New Mutants?
Well, we touched on this very briefly in our XMen Days of Future Past episode. There's a few characters in there. One character, maybe, Sunspot, is in that film.
Yep.
But most of my information of the New Mutants probably comes from X-Men Evolution.
Right.
Because you've got Sunspot, Cannonball, Wolfsbane.
Mhm.
That's about it, really. I've not really seen anything else that they've been in. They may have appeared in the actual X-Men of the 90s cartoon, but I can't remember.
Yeah, I think they crop up from time to time, don't they? It's strange because they are, despite the name, they're one of the oldest mutants in existence. So it's not surprising they have cropped up in films and in cartoons, but they've never really been focused on that much right up until the end of Fox's tenure with the franchise.
Yeah.
But we'll get on to that. So what do you want to start with? Do you want to start with the comic book or the film?
Well, we'll do the film as per usual.
Okay.
But before we get started, let's just take a little trip back in time to when I first watched the film. I was texting you and I said, hey, I'm watching The New Mutants. And you were like, is it any good? And I went, meh, about half an hour left. And you said, geez, it must be bad then.
Yep.
Yep.
That sounds about right.
I think I went on to say after I'd watched it, I think you should watch it, which again, you text back to say, I probably will at some point. I've seen all the others, plus I like the comics, probably why I'll be disappointed by the film. So my question to you is, were you disappointed by the film?
Yes.
Cool.
Pretty much, yeah. I mean, I watched it last year, actually, this film. Actually, before we go on to that, I suppose I should do the preamble.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, go on then. Preamble about the film.
So, The New Mutants is a 2020 film, loosely set within the Fox X-Men universe, but there's not a whole lot of connection to that. It features a group of young mutants coming to terms with their powers and themselves in a hospital that houses a dark secret.
Ooh.
Yeah, exactly. And the film is famous. Well, perhaps famous isn't actually the right word because
Infamous.
I don't think many people know of this film at all, let alone the behind the scenes goings on. But it had a pretty long, drawn out production development of the film, and it was eventually sort of plopped out into cinemas between lockdowns, I want to say, last year.
Yeah, because of contractual rights.
Yes, because it had to have a cinema release after the Disney purchase.
Yep.
Yeah, and then when it came out on digital release after that is when I saw it. So that was last year. I think it was released the year before in cinemas. But it, yeah, I mean...
It's a film.
It is a film, and I think that is as nice a thing as I can say about it. I mean, it is just disappointing, because as you said in your text there, as a fan of the New Mutants, I was looking forward to a different story, a story that hadn't been committed yet with the X-Men, you know, younger generation coming through, focusing on new characters. And I sort of forgot all about it. And then when I eventually saw it, I realised why, because it's very bland.
Yeah.
It's very forgettable.
Nothing much happens.
Yeah, it's strange, isn't it? Because it sort of, it presents itself, or the trailers and all that presented itself as a quote-unquote horror movie. it's really not. And it's not scary, so it can't be a horror movie.
Yeah.
And it takes a lot of inspiration from films like, what's it called? The Breakfast Club.
That scary film.
Well, that's, from the other side. So it's sort of these merging of genres to create something that isn't really any of them. It just sort of plods along. There's some vague plot to introduce each of the characters, and then it just sort of ends in the standard comic book ending, the team coming together to fight a big bit of CGI.
Yeah. It felt more to me like a pilot for a TV show.
Yeah, I can see that.
It's an hour and a half, which is roughly about 2 episodes of a TV show. Mm-hmm. And yeah, it just kind of ends. And you go, oh, okay, now we're off to go somewhere then to do a nice sort of like ending. No, that's it.
Yeah, and there was definitely some TV quality acting going on here as well, but we'll come on to that later. Yeah. Your opinion then is roughly in line with mine. Is it not great?
Yeah, I remember watching Comic-Con 2020 online when this film was sort of post-production, I guess.
Nearly coming out, whatever.
Almost coming out. And I watched it, there was an interview with the cast and the crew and everything like that. And I didn't have high hopes on it, but once I watched that, I thought, actually, this could be quite scary. It could be quite interesting because all of the cast and all of the people were like, it's such a good film, this and that and blah, blah. And I thought, great, this whole thing about it being a scary X-Men film. And then going back and watching the first trailer back in 2017, I think it was, 18?
It was something, it was 2017, I think it started production.
Yeah,
this thing. Yeah.
The first trailer was scarier than the actual film was because it's been in and out of post-production so much that it got chopped up and cut around. And
well, funny you say that because apparently it wasn't actually edited after all of that was said and done in terms of, because there was talk about them taking it back in, making it less of a horror movie.
Yeah.
And then because there was a positive fan reaction to the trailers, they decided not to do that.
Right.
So the word was when the film finally came out, it was as intended by the director.
I don't believe that because it was pushed back, or there was 5 dates for this film. It was April 2018.
Yeah.
Then it was February of the following year, and then it was August,
which is when COVID hit. So that's sort of
yeah. No, wait, sorry, no, COVID didn't hit until early 2020.
I suppose it was COVID-19, so it was end of 2019. But I suppose it didn't affect cinema releases.
Yeah, so April 2018, then it was February the following year, and August of the same year, and then it was April 2020 because it was pushed back to make room for Dark Phoenix, which that went well.
Great.
And then it finally went right. August 2020, just put it out. I don't care anymore.
Yeah.
So I thought that they may have done a couple of reshoots or a couple of bits of chopping it together back in 18 or that kind of era. But then I think when it got over to Disney, they were like, sod it, just put it out. I don't care anymore.
Well, apparently they were going to reshoot something or going to shoot something with John Hamm playing Mr. Sinister.
Yeah.
And that didn't happen. I think they had postponed it to shoot things like that. And I know what you mean, because the final act of this film has got very different. It's got a tonal shift where it becomes very much standard superheroes. And almost like someone who knows more about the characters' powers from the comics has come in and just gone, I'm going to make these characters more like their comic books for this final fight only, but won't change anything that's happened in the plot.
Pretty much.
Speaking of characters, we do this from time to time. I do want to run down the list of characters because these are lesser known, perhaps, to most people.
Yeah.
So let's talk about the characters. So we got Maisie Williams as a Rain Sinclair / Wolfsbane. So start with her. I mean, what were your thoughts? As someone who's not familiar with these characters.
Yeah, well, going back to when I first saw it, again on the text trail between us, I said that it took me a long time to realise that she was supposed to be Scottish.
That was going to be my question.
I didn't hear it.
Yeah.
I didn't hear it at all until the end. I was like, is she Scottish? I was like, I don't quite hear that, but okay, fine.
You are the only Scottish person I know who is completely incapable of doing a Scottish accent, though, so...
Well, it depends how many beers I've had. But I'm not an actor, so...
Oh, fair enough.
I don't care.
That is a good point.
I'm not paid to learn how to speak Scottish.
Neither is Maisie Williams, you might argue. So just in case you've not seen the film, Maisie Williams, as I say, plays Rain Sinclair, a Scottish mutant who can turn into a wolf and is struggling to reconcile this with her religious beliefs.
Yes.
And in the film as well, they have made her a lesbian. I don't think she is in the comic book, although all of Chris Claremont's female characters are at least bisexual. And they did cut the one lesbian member of the New Mutants from the comic books, although she wasn't in the Demon Bear saga, so you wouldn't know her, but Karma, the lesbian character on the New Mutants, and she obviously did not appear in this film anyway. So
I mean, she was probably in there, but we just didn't care to make notes about this person.
maybe. I mean, actually, I don't think this is too bad a transition. She's a bit, from a comic book perspective, the storyline roughly follows her backstory from the comic books, which is this sort of evil preacher who she goes to and who tries to beat the mutant out of her. You know, obviously there's an allegory there, so it makes sense that they draw the link one step further.
Yep.
But yeah, I mean, from my perspective, I think although her Scottish accent wasn't the strongest, not a bad transition.
Yeah, the thing with Maisie Williams is that I've not seen anything that she's been amazing at.
No.
I mean, I've not really watched Game of Thrones, but I've seen bits of it. She was in Doctor Who with Peter Capaldi's Doctor.
Yeah.
And she's in this. I've not seen anything else that I can think of right now. It's just sort of a bit bland, really.
I think this is the thing with a lot of child actors is they're good actors for children, but unless they continue to grow, they grow into kind of average adult actors a lot of time. She's quite good in a film, I can't remember what it's called, where all the children at a private school keep fainting. I can't remember what it's called. Anyway, we'll come back around to that. Anyway, let's move on to Anya Taylor-Joy as Ileana Rasputin / Magic. This is Colossus's sister in the comic books, although not mentioned in the film. She is a Russian mutant with vague sorcery powers in the film.
And a sword.
Exactly, sword powers.
Yep.
So what do you think of Anya Taylor-Joy as Ileana Rasputin?
She's a crazy bitch, and not in a good way. She's just so horrible.
She is.
And she's mental. And yeah, that's about it. Nothing else.
Yeah, I thought it was a really strange thing that they made her really racist early on and then tried to get you to care about her later on. I got that they built in a sort of, because in the comic book her power is she can teleport and then she gets sucked into a limbo dimension. She can teleport to this limbo dimension and out of it.
Yeah.
And she gets taken there where she spends most of her life growing up and trades off part of her soul for a sword, which is what the soul sword is about.
Got you.
In the film, they allude to some of that, but mostly it's just she's got random sword, teleportation, dragon, metal arm powers.
Yeah.
Random assortment.
You've just touched there on the limbo world, if you will. Is that kind of like Nightcrawler? So I don't know if I'm correct in saying this, but when he teleports, does he teleport through a different sort of world to get to where he wants to be? Or is that just X-Men evolution?
I mean, it's definitely Magic's thing.
Yeah.
Was that she would teleport via limbo. My impression was it wasn't for Nightcrawler, but you may be right. I might be wrong about that.
Oh, that was an X-Men Evolution series 2, I think it was.
Right.
He teleports, but he transports through this sort of hell kind of world. That's why he gets that sort of
that sulfur
burning smell.
Yeah.
But I didn't know if that was just an X-Men Evolution because they'd taken the idea from her, maybe.
Maybe, yeah. It was always Magic's thing. And to be honest, they came out not long apart, these two characters. It wouldn't surprise me if they did conflate the two.
Fair enough.
Obviously, the film doesn't have limbo in the truest sense. She says it's a realm she made up, although we then later see it. So there's some dispute about whether that's true or not.
Yeah.
But instead, it is heavily implied that she's the victim of sex trafficking, which is an interesting take.
My mind's gone blank. When did that happen?
Really?
I'm not being serious. Yeah.
So all of when she was abducted as a child, and then you've got the tall, thin men.
Oh right, no, yeah.
Who she imagines,
okay,
and she says they make me cry, and it makes them smile, which is why she imagines them to have these giant smiley faces.
Right. Okay, I've got you. Yeah, I didn't pick up on that. I guess I just wasn't paying too much attention because I'd seen it before, so I didn't care enough to pay attention. Apparently.
Yeah. I mean, speaking of which, those guys, obviously, those tall, lanky monster men, obviously ripped off from Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
Yeah.
To the extent where they then show the episode of Buffy the Vampire Slayer with them in Hush.
Oh, you've just taken a big old chomp out of my Easter egg.
I'll tell you what, I'll stop chewing now and I'll spit it out and you can come back to that.
I don't care. Yeah, that was pretty much what I was going to say about them. Only thing that I could find out about them is that the New Mutants face off a bunch or a gang called the Right, who are like these smiley-faced masked people.
Yeah.
I guess they were taking inspiration from that, maybe.
A little bit, yeah. Although the Right are, unsurprisingly, a sort of conservative anti-mutant group that try and kill mutants, but yeah.
Yeah, but they still wear those sort of smiley masks, so I guess they might have taken that idea from it, but There you go.
They sort of wear big mecha suits with smiley faces painted on them, yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, moving on. So we've also got Blue Hunt as Danny Moonstar / Mirage. She is a Native American mutant who can create illusions based on the fears and desires of other people.
Yeah.
In the comic, she is a sort of a leader of the team. She is a strong warrior and literally in the comic books an off and on Asgardian Valkyrie.
Really?
In the film, not so much, I would say.
No. Again, these characters just annoy me a bit. But she was, well, I say she was attacked. She wasn't even attacked. She was chased by a bear at the start and then fell over and she knocked herself out. Something that I didn't say, actually, and I love to touch on, is there was opening narration, but this time it wasn't Patrick Stewart. It was her.
Yeah.
Which they didn't need to include because halfway into the film, she says it all over again.
Yeah, and then at the end of the film, she says it again.
Oh, yeah.
They have the same bear story 3 times in that film.
Yeah. What else can you say about her?
Well, she's a bit of a wet blanket, but that's my entirety of my notes for her is that she is. And speaking of this, Charlie Heaton as Sam Guthrie Cannonball, an American mutant who is nigh invulnerable when blasting. In the comics, he's a good old farm boy. He's from rural Kentucky.
Yep.
He's pretty chipper. Turns out to be actually quite an intelligent, effective, compassionate co-leader of the New Mutants. And here, again, a bit of a wet blanket.
Yeah. He seems intent on hurting himself. I think they changed his backstory a bit for the film, that he killed his father and the mine collapsed and that kind of stuff.
The mine collapsing thing was in the comic books, a bit different, but yeah.
Right, okay.
It's taken inspiration from.
Yeah, because in the film, well, when you first see him doing the cannonball, which he does the cannonball like twice, maybe 3 times. I can't remember.
Well, the last time he fires off to fight the bear.
Yeah.
And then you just don't see what he does. He just cuts to someone else. It's like, oh, I assume he's helped, but
I assume he's alive still.
Yeah.
But yeah, the first time that you see him being a cannibal, he's tied himself to a slate of concrete or whatever, and he's just spinning around like a crazy man. And he's almost intent of hurting himself. Also, I don't get how his cast does not come off. If you vibrate that quickly, surely it's going to crack his cast.
Well, I mean, his clothes also don't fall off, and when he's carrying people, they don't get hurt either. So presumably he creates some sort of impenetrable barrier whilst he's blasting. Which begs the question how he broke his arm, but presumably that was after he landed. So
the explanation is comics.
Essentially, yeah.
Got ya.
But my point being, all of the characters in the comic book, I feel, have distinct personalities. In the film here, their personality is kind of neurotic.
Not there.
And yeah, they're all just sort of mopey kids in a boarding school or a hospital. Particularly Cannonball and Sunspot in the comic books were really buddy-buddy and good friends, which was quite cool. But we're going to move on now to Sunspot. Henry Zaga as Bobby DaCosta, a Brazilian mutant who can manipulate solar energy. Now, Ian, you know what I'm going to ask? We talked about this all the way back in our first episode, Days of Future Past. Did you, reading the comic and watching this film, notice any differences aesthetically between comic book Bobby and the film version?
The one on TV moved. Is that what you're getting at?
Not quite. Try again.
Right, so we touched on this ages ago.
Yeah.
In the film, he looks like he's on fire, like a ball of fire. He's hot, almost. Yet in the comic, and what we spoke about before, is that he is the sunspot, the spot of the sun. So he's the black bit of the sun, or the black heat of the sun.
Yeah.
With the fiery effects and the term that you said, the bubbles.
The sort of the Kirby dots and things like that. Yeah. But I mean, also, not just in his superpowered form, did you notice any aesthetic differences?
Oh, right. You're getting at that. Well, yeah, he's pretty much black in the comic, isn't he?
Yes, he is.
Yeah.
Yep, he is. He is definitely a mixed race character in the comic book. I believe he is Afro-Latino, so he is Brazilian, Afro-Brazilian. His dad is black, and it is a large part of his story that he is mixed race.
Yeah, because they touch on that, I'm pretty sure, in the comic, that he got bullied.
Yeah.
And then that's when it happened. That's when the change happened, that he was being picked on because of his race.
Yes.
And he started to fight back, and suddenly he caught fire, or however you want to explain it.
Yeah. Obviously, in the film, and in fact in Days of Future Past as well, he is not dark-skinned of any description. So that's the second time in a row this has happened, and we're now going to move on to another character who, almost identically, Alice Braga as Cecilia Reyes, a doctor who can generate protective fields, and again in the comic book, a dark-skinned Latina character, which this film just seems to insist does not exist.
Was she in this comic?
She's not in the comic book, but she is in the film.
Right, no, that's what got you. I was like, hold on, have I missed a page?
Well, even if she was in this comic book, you might be confused, because first of all, in the comics, again, as I say, she's dark-skinned Latin American.
Mm-hmm.
And second of all, spoiler alert, she is the closest thing in this film we get to a villain, and in the comics, she is very much not a villain. She is a hero.
Okay.
I think, in fact, I'm right in saying that we don't see her on many X-teams because she is essentially a pacifist. She'd rather use her powers for her doctoring to heal people and help people than she would go around beating people up. So it's a really strange choice for the villain of this film to be a heroic X-Men character. It'd be like if the warden of the hospital was just Colossus or something and was just beating them all up. It would be a really strange thing to happen.
Yeah, I don't really get her, to be honest. Well, I don't get any of this, really. But there's one particular bit, like, you know that Elena drugs her or something and she passes out for half a day, I don't know. So what do the kids do? They don't try and escape. They have a bit of fun. They push each other around on a wheelchair. They play the tambourine. They play some music.
Just like kids do.
Yeah.
I love that. It was like, what can we do? Let's go wild. And then just the next scene is someone just playing a tambourine. It's like, oh.
And then after Sunspot has his explosion in the pool and then she wakes up, she turns to, I'm going to call her Magic because I'll get her name wrong again.
Yep.
And she goes, right, you're going to have to clean up this mess. What mess? Are you referring to picking up the wheelchair? You want to put the tambourines back? There was no mess that I saw.
No, they went and, like you say, tambourine, wheelchair, and then did a polygraph test. These are the weirdest kids in the world, quite frankly, if this is their idea of fun. And they're all pretty awful to each other during that polygraph test as well. They are kind of the worst kids in the world. Like, this is a group of friends who you'd be, well, not necessarily friends, there's a group of people, if you're put into the same dorm as them at university or at school, you would go, can I move classes, please? This is... These people are weird. They're really boring. They keep just moping all the time. They make everything about themselves.
Yeah.
Can I leave?
Do you want to know the wording that I used to capture this film?
Sure.
Yawn fest.
Okay.
Because it was so boring, and I'm going to quote myself on this bit. You know, right at the end, when Danny falls asleep or she gets hit by the bear or something.
Oh, yeah.
I turned to Kate and said, Danny, wake the fuck up. If we have to stay awake for this film, so do you. Because at this point, I just didn't care. I'd seen it before, and I was like, I wouldn't have watched this film again if it wasn't coming up on the podcast.
No, I think that's exactly right. It is a film that you just don't need to watch once, let alone twice, to be honest. It is entirely forgettable. But we'll come back to that on the conclusion. So let's compare then these film depictions of the characters to the comic book, shall we? So the Demon Bear saga in the comics, New Mutants 18 to 20, by Chris Claremont and Bill Sienkiewicz. The comic tells the story of Danny Moonstar struggling to come to terms with the death of her parents and haunted by a bear. She goes out to confront her demons and ends up heavily injured in hospital, so the rest of the New Mutants must rally around to protect her while she undergoes surgery. That's pretty much the plot of the comic book. Yep. It's also very similar in a way. So, what do you think of the comic book?
An interesting read.
Okay.
You say it's similar to the film.
From a purely plot perspective of there is a demon bear, it's... Yeah.
Right, okay, so there's a bear coming, they need to not be killed, effectively. I've got a book of it here, and I've got little sort of excerpts. Mm-hmm. Excerpts? Is that the word?
That's the word, yeah.
Yeah, that's the word.
It's a word. I don't know if it's the right one yet.
It's a word. Is it the word? We'll find out. So I had little bits of previous comics in there. So I had like a couple pages from the first issue, which shows the relationship between Danny and Rain. Yep. Kind of shows how they blossomed their friendship and become friends, really. And it gives a little bit of a background with Danny. And then there was a couple pages from issue 3, which shows her being haunted by the bear in the mansion. Yep. And then there was I think it was the final page of issue 17 that leads then straight into the ones that we're doing. Yeah. I did skim them quite quickly, but it was quite nice to get a bit of a backstory on kind of like this main character. Yeah. But I'm glad that I read it. And then going into the main run that we read, yeah, it's good. I think I'm used to, by the amount that we've read, I'm used to reading the X-Men stuff because we've picked up a lot over the years, year and a half. So I did just sort of slip straight into it. Yes. It didn't take me a while to get used to. You pick it up, buy a couple of panels, you're into the style of this era. You're familiar with the Claremontian writing style by now, yeah? Exactly, yeah. So yeah, it's very similar to his other work, really. I think I'll be treading old water by going into the way it looks and the way it's been written. very similar to his other 80s stuff.
The way it looks in particular, though?
Yeah, because he's only the writer, isn't he? He's not the artist.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the artwork... Yeah, right, that is different, because I think it's a different artist.
It is, and it's an extremely different art style.
Yeah.
It is abstract. It's Bill Sienkiewicz, and it is, I personally, I love the art. I think those images of the bear looming over Danny, filling the panels, filling the pages, and enveloping everything is, they're really amazing sort of visceral reactions to these characters. They're, they're daunting and scary and, as I say, abstract, but they need to be. I think that's what differentiates New Mutants and why it's so good. Because obviously it wasn't always Bill Sienkiewicz, there's other artists involved, but what really set this arc out is this really unique art style, this sort of stylistic quality to it, as opposed to the mainline X-Men book, which was used to dealing in more, superheroic terms, in terms of everyone had the same proportions and it was a very straightforward way of telling story in terms of the art style. Whereas I find that the art in this Bill Sienkiewicz's art is just, I really like it. I think the character design is really unique. All of the characters feel different.
Yep.
They're not all just tall, muscular dudes with the same build. You've got Sam, who's lanky and gaunt and long-faced. You've got Bobby, who's shorter and more classically handsome. It just feels like whether these characters are in uniform or not, you'd be able to tell them apart.
Yeah.
There are some artists where if you put Steve Rogers, Hank Pym, Danny Rand, and Barry Allen from the DC universe for some reason,
Fair enough.
if you put them in the same room, right, without their uniforms on, you would have a hard time differentiating between 4 handsome blonde white guys, and that would be it.
Yeah, pretty much.
But you never get that with Sienkiewicz.
Yeah.
I can really differentiate between these characters, give each one a unique flavour.
Yeah, so like I said, I've got the book of it, and after issue 20 ends, it goes on to X-Force.
Yeah.
Issue 7 up to 10.
Yeah.
And that was 2008. But just you there talking about the artwork, I guess I didn't really realise the difference between the other 80s stuff of X-Men because I've not read that in a while. But once I'd read issue 20, I flicked over the page just to have a look. And it's such a different style of 2008. It's so clean, it's so crisp, it's so bright. Yeah. And then you compare it to the actual comic that we read and you go, actually, I prefer this one, the one that we're reading, because it's quite scratchy, it's quite powerful and different. But you don't realise it. And let's say I'd gone from Dark Phoenix to this, then I probably would have realised. Or it would have been at the forefront of my brain. Yeah,
no, exactly right. I think that's what really set these books apart, even though they're both written by Claremont at the time. And there was a little bit less narration in New Mutants than there is in X-Men. But yeah, the art styles, it really sets New Mutants apart as something distinct. I mean, the New Mutants, I think I'm right in saying, is the first spin-off of X-Men. So you had Uncanny X-Men for years. That became a massive hit. So Marvel wanted more, and they said, right, we're going to go do a spin-off with or without you, Claremont. And he said, right, well, in that case, I want creative control. I'll write it.
So how many issues roughly did this run for? 100?
Think I'm right in saying
200? 1,000?
No, it changed, I think, it ran for over 100, I think, but as 2 different titles, New Mutants and then X-Force. That was when they introduced Cable and everyone became big gun-toting, satchel-laden people. But this pre-exists all that. This pre-exists. Yeah. We're used to thinking of the X-Men as this sort of sprawling, you've got X-Force and X-Men and, X-Men Red, Gold, Blue, all the different teams, loads of different comic books. But this is really early days. This is the first spin-off.
Yeah.
And he wanted to create, it wasn't just, right, well, I'm going to still use Beast, Wolverine, and this guy, and I'm going to put them on a different team, and it's all going to be sort of the same characters. He created a whole brand new team, the next generation of mutants, as it were.
Yeah. So to put it in perspective with comics that we've covered, this was after Dark Phoenix, Days of Future Past, and God Loves, Man Kills.
It was, I believe, around that similar time, but yeah, it was the 80s, though, so early 80s. I can't remember exactly if it's before all of those, but yeah, it's around that sort of time. So Illyana Rasputin was showing up because her brother was in the mainline X-Men title. She was showing up as a child in the main X-Men storyline, and then the period where she disappears is actually in that story, and then when she comes back as a slightly older, so she's a really young child at that point. She disappears into the limbo dimension, comes back shortly afterwards as a grown teenager, and then gets put onto the New Mutants. So they're happening around the same time. It's about the 80s, yeah.
Okay, fair enough. Well, we touched on the characters earlier on, so I don't want to go through them all again.
Yeah.
But the thing that I will mention is the relationships between the characters. Because, like I said, in the early issues, they do hint at a friendship between Danny and Brain.
Yeah.
That's hinted at, and they've got a sort of psychic link together kind of. Maybe not quite psychic, but they definitely got a link together.
Yeah.
There's a little hint towards Sunspot liking Elena. Is that her name?
Yeah,
A hint.
there's a hint, but the character we don't get in the film that we do get in the comics is Magma. Amara Aquila, I think her name is. Something like that.
Near enough.
I haven't written that down. I should have done. I mean, the main thing I know about Magma, apart from this, is she has never been a major X-Men despite this. She's sort of the least well-known of the New Mutants, hence why she got dropped from the film.
Mm-hmm.
For some reason, she was the lead character in X-Men Legends, the Xbox video game.
Yeah, good point.
She was like the character you have to rescue at the beginning. It was a really strange choice. But yeah, you don't really get her in this. And there's a sort of a love connection there. Is it between Sunspot or is it between Cannonball? No, I can't remember.
Cannonball. Because Cannonball attacks Elena because he thinks that she stabbed him.
That's the one.
But she actually saved him.
Yeah, that's the one.
Oh, spoiler. All of this is spoiler.
Yeah, so that's a couple of the characters. And that's what I quite like about the New Mutants, is they felt more like, rather than a sort of disparate group of people, they felt like a bunch of teens in a school growing up together and were meant to be sort of school friends as opposed to being a superhero team.
Yeah.
And in fact, one of the regular things that happened in these early issues is Professor Xavier saying, don't get involved with this, and then going out and getting involved with it anyway.
Because they're kids.
Yeah. Whereas the X-Men team was very much, right, let's go and solve this. We're the superhero team. We're meant to be going out. But obviously, this is only a taster of those early New Mutants. You know, this is 18 to 20 of quite a long run. Halfway through Claremont's portion of it, it then went on to another writer afterwards. But
right.
You say you found it interesting.
I think there's not enough of it for me. I mean, I was quite happy to read it for this episode because I didn't get much for the film and I didn't want the comic to be like a 20-issue run that I had to slog through.
Yeah.
But I think it's too short for me. I do know that the Demon Bear comes back in maybe the X-Force or at some point, but we spoke about people coming back in the past. You sort of you leave a thread.
Yeah.
And then 10 years later you go, oh, this one's his brother or something stupid. I think also what put me off a little bit was in issue 18 and with 19, not too sure, there's that sort of subplot about Warlock.
Yes.
Just sort of there. But again, I'm assuming it leads on to something else.
The very next issue, I believe, is Warlock focused. So it's sort of setting up for the following arc. And this is the strange thing, and this is kind of why this comic, of all the things we've covered, it reminds me of Days of Future Past the most, is that was a 2-issue run, I think. This is a 3-issue run.
Oh, yeah.
That has had a disproportionate amount of impact on the storylines and the world and the films. You know, it's amazing what people latch onto, because this is just another arc in an ongoing comic book. It's 3 issues of 150 that Claremont wrote, whatever it was. And for some reason, certain things just grab the public attention more. And I think that's happened with, as I say, Days of Future Past was 2 issues of an ongoing run, sandwiched between a story about Blob and Juggernaut, whatever it was. and yeah, it's always interesting to see that. And that's what this reminds me the most of, is that Days of Future Past run we read. What we had with Days of Future Past, however, was the little bit of context, because we read the 3 or 4 issues leading into that.
Yes.
Which we didn't do here. So I kind of feel like maybe if we had read half a dozen issues going up to it, or even just the first 20 issues, but that's a lot of commitment for a bi-weekly podcast. Yeah, it probably would have hit home a bit further if you had known the characters beforehand. Yeah,
like I said, I've read those little pieces of the previous ones, which helped me a lot to rather than just going straight into issue 18.
Yeah.
So I got some background of it, and probably what I should have done is read the comic and then watched the film, not the other way around, because the film just put a bad taste in my mouth. I was like, all right, well, let's read the comic then. See,
that's my worry, and that's why I always get concerned about, I don't mind people changing things for film in terms of comic books, but when there's a bad adaptation, e.g., let's take a hypothetical example. If they ever made Iron Fist into a TV show, say, and it was rubbish, that would be people's impression of Iron Fist.
Yeah.
So that is my worry, is that people see the New Mutants and they think, oh, this is indicative of what it is. It's a bunch of boring teenagers being boring. And it's not. It is one of the earliest X-Men teams. It is some of the earliest mutant heroes. And they have very distinct and interesting adventures and art styles of their own that are separate. It's not just X-Men Team A, B, C. It is X-Men and New Mutants at this point. 2 very distinct teams.
Yeah, spot on.
Right. I think we've talked enough about the comic book. Let's get to the main event. Your favourite. What Easter eggs do you have for us this week? Iain's egg hunt. Iain's egg hunt. Iain's egg hunt.
I'm not yoking you. Right, so if you've not kind of had the sense I didn't care for the film as much as I do normally.
Did you not?
No.
Oh.
So my Easter egg are a little bit lackluster, shall we say.
No change there then.
But you mentioned earlier on about Mr. Sinister.
I did.
Don't know if you actually said his name, but I think it was John Hamm that was attached.
It was indeed.
Did you say that? I can't remember now.
I did.
You did, there you go.
I stole all your Easter eggs this week.
No, that's not the egg.
Just gobble, gobble.
Gobble, gobble. I'm a hungry boy.
I'm a hungry chicken.
So with Dr. Reyes.
Chickens don't eat eggs. That's a weird thing.
Anyway, with Dr. Reyes, she's got a pin on her jacket.
Mm-hmm.
It's the same as Mr. Sinister's red diamond on his forehead.
Red gem, yeah. And it appears on the computer screen as well, doesn't it? It's the sort of logo for the Essex Corp.
Yeah, I had that as well. I definitely saw that. There's Walsh shaking his head. And there's a bit where Rain and Danny are on the grass in front of a couple, well, I say couple, quite a few tombstones. And you can see a few numbers around. The two that caught my eye was 138, which could be a reference to Volume 1, Issue 38 of the New Mutants, which has a New Mutants graveyard on the front cover.
Right, okay.
So that's a little hint.
Yep.
And 137 could, very, very loosely could, the Uncanny X-Men issue 137, as this is the end of the Dark Phoenix saga. And that's probably the most famous X-Men death, being Jean Grey. But that could be a bit of a reach.
I was just looking up. There's actually New Mutants number 37, I just looked up, was apparently called If I Should Die, and it has all of the deaths of all of the New Mutants in some sort of hypothetical situation. So that could also be it.
Well, there you go. I'm going to use yours.
Okay.
But they both include death.
They do indeed.
There you go. A nice happy Easter egg.
What else you got?
Well, I had a whole section on the Smiling Men, but someone ruined it.
Well, no, go on. Let's do the smiling.
No. We spoke about them being the gentlemen from Buffy, and they were on the TV screen.
Yep.
But did you know who voiced the Smiling Men or a Smiling Man?
I can't say I did. I know that the gentlemen, weren't they Doug Jones, or first one was, but who voiced a smiling man?
He did a cover of Tainted Love.
Oh no.
Marilyn Manson.
Oh dear.
I mean, I didn't even know that there was a voice for them, apart from that weird shriek.
No, I didn't think there was either. And then, well, he's a very controversial figure these days, so maybe we should move on swiftly.
Move on swiftly to a couple of name drops.
Well, actually, before we move on, I just want to say, I picked up on when I was watching the film, is she was watching Buffy in a couple of scenes, right?
Yeah.
So she watched the episode with the gentleman, Hush. I think she was also watching, the first time we see her watching it is she's watching the kiss between Willow and Tara, which I'm pretty sure happens after. I'm pretty sure that's from the episode The Body. So she's watching these series completely out of order. Like she's watched, one day she was watching series 5 and then she went to series 4 or whatever. That bugged me.
I mean, if that's the worst thing about this film, I mean, it's done pretty well.
I mean, in fairness, it's not the worst thing about this film, but if I'm paying attention to that instead of the film, it's probably got bigger problems.
Fair enough. I have got an interesting fact coming up, but before I do, I'm just going to do a couple of the name drops that were in the comic. We got Hulk and Dr. Stephen Strange.
Yes.
Right at the end of issue 20. I just like it when they sort of expand the world a bit in comics. It's always quite fun to me.
Yep.
And the interesting fact is that Josh Boone, the director, intended this to be the first of a trilogy.
Don't they all?
So the first being the first what we've got. The second to be an alien invasion, which would feature
The Brood?
Warlock.
Oh, I see. Right, okay.
And the third to be a supernatural post-apocalyptic horror film that was based on the comic event Inferno.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So those were big storylines during the New Mutants X-Men run. That was a big crossover event, was Inferno. I always, Warlock is so tied to Doug... No, I was going to say Doug Jones, but that's not right. Doug Ramsey, to me. And obviously Doug Ramsey is... Again, not in this story, but yeah, those two characters are so tied that I guess they would have had to introduce both in the sequel, which would have been nice, but whatever.
Yeah. And just to tie them together then, over the credits at the end, the artwork was created by the comic book artist, Bill
Sienkiewicz.
Thank you for saying his last name.
You're welcome.
Yeah.
I thought that would happen. Yeah, I'd jump in there.
Bill Sienkiewicz.
Sienkiewicz. I did think it was really strange that they did those weird... It's like the end of the Lord of the Rings trilogy, you know, Return of the King, where they had portraits come up, and it was like, you know, this is not the end of the Lord of the Rings trilogy. There is nothing that has happened in this film that is epic enough for you to warrant this level of grandeur.
These oil painting style artwork.
Yeah. Anyway, conclusion.
All right.
Wrapping up on the New Mutants. What did you think of the film? What did you think of the comic book?
Well, it didn't come up in the film section, so I want to just pop it in here. My favourite...
What's your name, James?
Let's talk about it for half an hour. Sorry, James. He won't listen.
He won't.
My favourite bit of the film, and this will probably show you how bad the film was when Lockheed came to life. My favourite bit of the film is that it's just puppet all the way through, and then suddenly he's real, and I fucking loved that bit.
Yeah, but was that imagination as well? That was her mental state, or was that...
Oh, I didn't think about it that much.
All right. Either way, he wasn't an alien dragon, was he? Which is not cool.
No.
He should have been an alien dragon.
But I will stick to my initial response to the film, I guess, which was meh.
Yeah.
Your thoughts of the film?
So the film, to me, it's like plain crisps. Not salted, but plain flavoured.
Right, I thought you meant crisps that you eat on a plane.
The what?
I honestly thought crisps that you eat on a plane.
No. Like plain flavoured crisps.
Got you.
Like, it doesn't matter how much you dress up the packaging and pretend it's something else. Even the world's biggest fan of crisps is only going to get a certain amount of enjoyment. So you may not regret eating them if you ate some plain crisps, but you're almost certainly going to wish you had ordered another flavour.
Yeah.
This film is bland, is basically what I'm saying, I think, by that.
If this was 3 hours long or 2 hours long, I'd probably be complaining a lot more.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, and to be fair, there's nothing that objectionable happens. It's just boring for the most part.
Yeah.
And if you're a fan of the comics, then you're a bit disappointed because everything's very boring and it shouldn't be. But again, like you say, it's nothing that bad and it's over before you know it. But that is not a ringing endorsement for anything.
Of course not.
And what about the comic book? What did you think of that?
Yeah, I said it was interesting, worth a read. Maybe if you are going to read it, potentially start from issue 1 and just work all your way through to issue 20 or even further on, because the next bit introduces Warlock.
Does indeed.
Well, it's already been introduced, but comics and all that. Yeah, I said I'm glad that I read it, even before we started the podcast when they announced the film, and I thought, oh, okay, I'll have a little look at that. So I'm glad that I read it.
Yeah.
I might go back and read the first 20 issues at some point. Maybe once the sort of taste of the film is washed away.
Yeah. I mean, I'm a fan of the comic book.
Yep.
I'm a big fan of Chris Claremont's XMen, as you know. We've talked about it. We've covered it 3 or 4 times now on the podcast. And I'm a really big fan of Bill Sienkiewicz's art as well. The abstract style really works for me, and it really works as well, I think, for the title and the story that they're telling here. This is only 3 issues long.
Yep.
It's just a small taste of what the New Mutants is and what it becomes under Louise Simonson's run as well afterwards that takes on from Chris Claremont. It's probably the best run that there is. But it's a really enjoyable tenure in terms of the storyline, and I would highly recommend it, as well as Chris Claremont's X-Men.
Yeah.
This era of X-Men is really where modern comics, where video games, the TV series, the cartoon, the films, all of it stems from this era.
Yeah.
But what was Kate's opinion of the film?
So she said, I won't be in a rush to watch that again.
No, neither was I. I was a bit disappointed I had watched it last year, to be honest, because that was too soon for a rewatch.
I was tempted to buy it, in fact.
God.
When it came up, I thought, I'll buy the comic, I'll buy the film, fine. And then the end of it, I was like, I'll just rent it. I don't want it on my shelf.
No, you could put up a lovely Instagram post with the DVD and the comic book, and everyone would go, why the hell have you bought that DVD?
Burn that now. Burn the film. Burn this phone that you've taken.
I can't imagine anyone getting that passionate about it, to be honest, actually.
Well, the actors weren't. So.
Right, that's it for this week. Any other business?
Well, shall we move on from the New Mutants and talk about the new Batman?
Oh, that was seamless.
Segue.
Yes, because we've now both seen The Batman. Been out for about 2 weeks now.
Yep.
So, yeah, we should probably talk about it. You watched it most recently last night. What did you think?
So, I'm going to just pop it in here. I mean, when people are hearing this episode, it will be an extra 2 weeks anyway.
Yep.
But if you've not seen it, I'm going to try and be as spoiler-free as possible, but things that I might stumble into could be spoilery.
Right. Do you want me to start then? Because I've purposely written my bit without spoilers.
Yeah, no, it's not. There is no spoilers that I'm going to say, but
Okay.
people like me, I wouldn't want to listen to 2 people talk about their opinions of the film without going to see the film.
I mean, that's 99% of what this podcast is. You know that, right?
Wow, that explains the low views. Oh, I'm kidding. Well, no, I really enjoyed it. So it's a grimy Gotham with crooked cops. That's sort of always been the way, hasn't it? It's a bit too long for me. They could have trimmed down some scenes. It's very, very packed with characters. And we touched on this when we spoke about The Dark Knight Rises. but this doesn't feel to me overstuffed. Each character has a part to play in the plot.
Yeah.
Very exciting fights, and it has great cinematography. Also, that car chase was amazing.
Yeah.
Your views?
Oh, okay. No, I enjoyed it. I did. And you almost echoed my sentiment exactly, in fairness. You know, as a film, I don't think it overtakes Batman Begins or The Dark Knight in terms of quality in my eyes. I like the emphasis on the detective elements, but the film is, as you say, nearly 3 hours long, and for me, a little bit baggy, particularly in the final 20 minutes or so. They felt a little bit extraneous, a little bit unnecessary. But that said, this with Batman Begins, which you know is my favourite of the Nolan trilogy.
I do now.
You do now. it may be my favourite live-action portrayal of Batman.
Okay.
It's certainly my favourite live-action portrayal of Gotham, like you say.
Yeah.
Again, we talked about before about Gotham, how it basically just became, between Batman Begins and The Dark Knight, it just became Chicago. Whereas this, it actually seemed to have, outside of a couple of bits which were clearly inspired by London or New York, or, you know, you had Gotham Square Gardens at the end, which I thought was bit on the nose, but you know, this genuinely felt like a sort of lived-in, grimy, rain-soaked city with its own distinct geography, history, culture in a way. It felt like its own thing as Gotham, as a unique city of its own.
Yeah.
And as for the actors, I thought Pattinson was very good. I liked the emo Batman. I think it's genuinely funny. I mean, it's the fact that it's canonical that he listens to Nirvana. It's like, of course he does. Yeah, that's exactly what he'd be up to.
I do like this interpretation of the Bat.
Yeah.
It's very good, it's very grounded, but I don't like the brooding Wayne.
Right.
He's too brooding. He has no playboy persona, which I think even Alfred sort of starts being like, you've got to take care of your family's work and your family's life. He's like, I don't care.
Yeah.
Leave me alone. I've got floppy hair. Leave me alone.
But that's very much, without going into any spoiler territory, that's very much a theme of the film. I think the supporting cast were very good, almost without exception, very well cast as these sort of proto-versions of the comic book characters that you know and love. You know, you've got Selena Kyle before she's full-on Catwoman, you've got the Penguin, the Riddler, even Gordon before he becomes Commissioner. It really feels like the first step into a greater world. And, you know, I really want to see more of it.
Yeah.
You know, that's the thing. It may not live up to, in my eyes, Dark Knight and Batman Begins. Perhaps that was just the time in which I saw them. But I can't wait to see more of this world that they're creating. I'm really glad they're going to be doing an HBO miniseries. They're going to be doing sequels almost without fail. You know, it's already made 400 million. So it's definitely getting a sequel, let's face it. So yeah, can't wait to see what happens next.
It does feel like these are his early days, almost like if Batman Begins was year one, this is more like year two. I mean that in theory. I've not read Batman year two. I don't know the actual parts of it.
In fairness, we talked about this in our Dark Knight episode, which is when we read The Long Halloween, which the film takes inspiration from.
Yep.
And I described that as if Batman Begins is Batman year one, then this was Batman year two.
Yeah.
And in fact, very on the nose, there is early on in the film a diary that Batman is writing in that says Batman year two on the front of it, I'm pretty sure. I was like, oh, okay, that's...
I think there's talk as well that he'd only been doing it for a couple of years. So they are very obviously attempting that. Let's not do an origin story.
Exactly.
But let's start at the beginning.
Yeah.
Which, not a spoiler, but there is no childhood flashback to his orphaning origins. Which I like that they just decided to do the Spider-Man thing and go, right, you know what's happened. Let's not film it.
Yeah.
You know his parents died.
What?
Oh, did you not?
What? No, it wasn't in the film. How was I meant to know?
Oh.
Why has no one ever told me? They should have put that in one of the films before, surely.
You touched on the characters very quickly there. So. Oh, well.
The poor Waynes!
While Ian cries himself to sleep.
Oh, no.
I want to just talk about the characters very, very quickly. You do the same.
What's Bruce going to do without his parents?
Are you done?
Carry on. Yeah, I'm done.
When Zoe Kravitz was announced as the cat, I don't know why, but I was very indifferent about it. But I don't know why.
Well, if you've not seen her in much, I suppose.
Oh, yeah. After I'd seen it, I think she's a very comic, accurate character, or at least the ones that I've read. Very, very good. Perhaps perfect. See what I was doing there?
Yeah, you said she was perfect in the role.
Yeah, but like a cat. Anyway, and I spoke about not being able to see Hardy as Bane. But holy umbrella, Batman, Colin Farrell's Penguin. I could not see it's Colin Farrell.
It's amazing, wasn't it?
Fantastic.
I really like that.
Yeah.
I really liked it. And it's incredible what he could emote under all that sort of latex and makeup. It was really impressive. Yeah. That's what I mean about all of the cast almost without fail, I would say.
Couple of small things about the Riddler. Not going to say much because
No spoilers.
just go see it.
Yeah.
It's a very unique take on the character. A polar opposite of Jim Carrey's cartoon brought to life version in Batman Forever.
Yeah.
It's inspired by a bunch of things, as we said, sort of year one, The Long Halloween. Also comics that I've not read, that there's no point in me saying because I don't know what the references are. But also films like Seven and Zodiac.
Yeah, the Finchner references were strong in there. You know,
Yeah.
he was definitely a real-life serial killer writ large in a sort of comic book world, yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I would go see it. If you don't want to sit in the cinema for 3 hours, maybe wait till it's out on disc, watch it at home. But I think watching it on the big screen, especially with like surround sound, really does help you fit into this world quite nicely.
Definitely. Well, that's it for this episode, I believe. Thank you very much. Thank you all for listening. If you want to get in touch, you can contact us on Twitter at becometheteapot and all sorts of other newfangled social media, the links to which you can find in the notes below. And if you like the show, please rate and subscribe on your preferred listening platform. It really does help. Next episode, we're getting radical as we move from the New Mutants to the Teenage Mutants. That's right, we're paying a visit to the lean green fighting machines that are the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. For some reason, we've chosen to watch the 2014 version, so instead of the original comics, we've also decided to read the IDW run that was coming out around the same time, in order to see what could have been. It's sure to be a shell of a time.
So grab your skateboard, grab some pizza, and join us. Cowabunga, man!
Next episode, we're getting radical as we pay a visit to the lean green fighting machines that are the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. For some reason... Oh, is that not next week?
I thought it was Wanted.
Is it Wanted next week? Fuck!
We can switch it if you want.
I haven't written an outro, so yeah, if we could switch it.
I've now got to think of a thing.
Did you have something for Wanted?
No, I didn't. That's the thing.
Oh, well, there we go then. Fuck it hell. Just say something then.
What's the intro of the cartoon?
What do you mean? Oh, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Heroes in a half shell, turtle power. They're the world's most foremost fighting team. They're heroes in a half shell and they're green. When the evil Shredder attacks...
What are you doing?
I'm waiting for you to say a lie.
Cowabunga, man!
Brilliant. Amazing. Right, it's stop.